Councilmember Tagent, can you hear us? Mic check.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. We'll
Great.
start.
I'll use them. I need a motion for the agenda changes then? or-
Does that have the C one though?
Okay, hey, we're gonna
Oh, you
kick
can
this
plug the
meeting
brick
off.
in.
This is
There,
gonna be
and then plug
a
it-
city council workshop for the city of Lake Stevens. January 21st, 2025, and we are down at the mill. This is being recorded and will later be published on our YouTube channel. With that, I'll call the meeting to order and hand it off to Council President Darning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So really quick, we've got a couple changes to the agenda here. The first one is there's going to be 2C added, which is the Parks Report. And then we're also going to flip items 2 and 3 and do the joint meeting first so that way the planning commissioners can get out of here early if they need to. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Russ for the joint city council and planning commission meeting.
Okay, thank you, Council. Russ Wright, Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens. We're going to do a couple of things tonight. So first of all, welcome to the Planning Commission. They can all introduce themselves in a bit, but I think you know most of them. So first thing we're going to do is just briefly go over our work program. I'm going to hand it off to Dave Levitan for a few minutes, and he can talk about the survey that we put out a month or so ago to get some feedback. And then we'll have a moderated conversation. Some of the questions are on there. And hopefully we can get some good feedback between the two boards. And with that, I'll just briefly run through the proposed 2025 work program. So one of the things we did this year, go back through the last couple of years of programs and tried to look at where we can consolidate or refine some of the requests. And so what we came up with is a list of about, six or seven items. So the first thing is going to be our process code update. This moves forward with the interim ordinance that we enacted earlier this year, again, in response to some state legislation as it relates to permitting timelines and process adjustments that we need to make. So that will be one thing we're looking at. We've also had a long-standing item for a streets and sidewalk update, as well as looking at our parking and some related items like concurrency as we've completed our 2025 comp plan. So those will be moving forward. However, I will say the parking portion of this, we may need to put a hold on. Some legislation is in front of the legislature right now that would dramatically reduce parking throughout all cities. So we need to see what happens with that before we decide about changing our regulations, because I don't want to come back and do it again next year if mandated to do so. But the streets portion, we're doing that in coordination with Public Works as they're updating their engineering standards. We're going to be looking at the codified sections, and they'll be looking at the how do we build it section. So those will dovetail together quite nicely. The next thing we're going to look at, and again, there may be some changes. We've updated our housing action plan, our housing element of our comprehensive plan, set our new growth targets. And so we wanted to revisit our mixed use housing, our infill housing, and some of the rebates and other subsidies or incentives that we apply for affordable or moderate rate middle housing. Surprise, new housing bill in Olympia that is going to look at creating a new wing of the Department of Commerce to ratify the housing elements of each city with ongoing reporting, and then maybe looking to have some new regulatory powers. So again, just read it briefly today. I don't have a good handle on it, even though it was already going to go to first hearing today. So that'll also be with our housing implementation, a bit of a wait and see to make sure that whatever we do, we're not redoing again sometime later this year or next year. We have our Lake Stevens Industrial Center implementation. So you're all familiar with the infrastructure analysis we did a couple of years ago. This moves that project forward, considering new zoning regulations and design regulations for our industrial center. The next thing is a mandated update for our critical areas regulations. That happens every few years where the state will publish some new guidance. And so then we need to update our development regulations to meet those new state guidelines. And the biggest change this year is we will also be adopting critical aquifer regulations. So that's your groundwater. In the past, we haven't had any groundwater reserves in our UGA after we annexed the industrial area a few years ago. We did annex some of these reservoir areas, so that will be a portion of our study then as we update our critical areas regulations. And then we also have our annual comprehensive plan docket. It should be a pretty light docket, with the exception, this is the year that the Parks and Recreation Department will be working on their new Parks and Recreation open space plan, which may supersede the Parks and Recreation element we have in the plan, or that might be modified to make sure that the GMA requirements as well as the RCO requirements are both taken into account. So we will work closely with Parks throughout the year on that process. And otherwise, we haven't had any private docket requests, but we always update the capital facilities element to make sure that our 6-year and our 20-year capital projections are completed. So with that, I am going to hand it off to Dave, and he's going to talk about some of the survey we put out and what those results look like.
All right. Thanks, Russ. David Levitan, Senior Planner. So yeah, I'm just going to touch on this really briefly. It's included within your packet as attachment 2. So back when we spoke with the Planning Commission at their November meeting and we're starting to think about the 2025 work program, we wanted to provide them an opportunity to not just look forward, but also evaluate some of the work that had occurred in 2024 and provide some feedback to staff as far as how to improve the long-range planning process, and then kind of prepare in anticipation of this joint meeting with City Council and the eventual ratification of the 2025 long-range planning work program. So we prepared just a quick and easy survey, a couple of questions that are included there at the beginning of attachment 2 for this item that kind of asks them to evaluate how the comp plan worked, went in 2024. That obviously dominated the long-range planning work program. Kind of what went well, how staff could kind of increase and improve public engagement. This is a topic that comes up pretty much every year, how we can get the word out, how we can get more feedback from the community, kind of allow them that opportunity so that we can incorporate that into future years' work programs. Really kind of as Russ just went over with the proposed 2025 work program, as far as the code amendments, especially wanted to provide commissioners with an opportunity to identify some of their priorities. In the past, we haven't always gotten to all of the code amendments on the annual work programs because we usually have pretty ambitious work programs. And as things do, they pop up, things that we have to tackle. So wanted to allow commissioners to provide that feedback. There were requests from commissioners kind of in advance of the survey and then in our subsequent discussion back on January 8th, just to provide them as much information and to kind of differentiate between things that are statutorily required, things that have to occur in 2025 because of the Growth Management Act or because we're required to update our critical areas ordinance, and then things that are more kind of optional that could potentially be pushed off into future years as needed. So the results are included, kind of the individual responses are included in that table that's in blue and white at the end of attachment 2, kind of the very end of your meeting packet this evening. Didn't include individual commissioner names, but we had a very kind of robust and a very substantive and very helpful discussion at the January 8th Planning Commission meeting, and have now invited the planning commissioners here to kind of follow up on some of that feedback that they provided. Kind of as summarized in the staff report, and I'll end it after this. Housing implementation, as expected, was a top priority for several of the commissioners, I think 4 out of the 7. But there were really a variety of different viewpoints and a variety of different priorities that were expressed by planning commissioners. And so as we move towards the city council ratifying that long range work program, I think it's good information to have. It'll provide for a good foundation for the discussion this evening. And yeah, with that, Russ, did you have anything additional?
I'll just maybe add some specifics to the conversation of the 8th. So one of the questions posed was the comp plan process. Generally, everyone was pretty satisfied. As mentioned, we can always work to improve our communication with the public. And we had a pretty good discussion on some additional ways to expand public engagement, maybe including targeting some other agencies or organizations such as faith-based organizations, schools, et cetera. So we'll continue to look at those other opportunities. Also some conversation, again, that you've already heard about. How do we decide which items to prioritize? And we heard from the Planning Commission what they have interest in. So we'll be looking to the City Council to also provide some guidance. I'll throw out the caveat that some of the way we design our annual work program, though, takes into thought what the regulatory timelines are going to be. And it also looks at the staff resources we have. So we can't bundle all of the large projects in a single quarter or part of the year, that we kind of have to stagger those again based on those deadlines and the staff availability. And then some of those we have funding resources available as well. And then there was some conversation about when commissioners' recommendations aren't adopted by the city council. I would say that doesn't happen very often, but there was sort of a discussion of that. And some of the other topics, just briefly, Planning Commission's interested in a lot of the same topics that the council is in, such as UGA expansion, housing, all of those different things. One thing that really came through, though, is what is the role of your liaisons to their boards and commissions. And in this case, I'll let the Planning Commission, speak to this, but there is a desire to maybe have the liaison do some more direct report outs And then likewise to ensure that when they're doing their presentations back to council, that they just include, the substantive items from those meetings. And as I did a little bit of research, that is entirely consistent with your rules and procedures. It's not really established what that reporting looks like. So that's definitely possible. It just specifies that they're more, I'll say, an ex officio type position where they're not actively engaged. They're there as observants, not as participants, to, keep the distinction between the two roles. That's another thing we talked about, was the distinction of roles between the Planning Commission and the City Council, where the City Council is the legislative body tasked with funding decisions, policy decisions, et cetera. And the Planning Commission is an advisory body that makes recommendations on land use matters to the City Council. There's also a desire, again, just more communication. How do we bring general city initiatives back to the Planning Commission? So staff's thinking about that. How do we communicate what's going on in capital projects or other things throughout the city that might be of interest? So we're going to continue to work on how do we bring some of that information forward without also creating a lot of additional work for my team as an additional task. And one of the things they did talk about, and again, this goes back to communication, is just the transparency with decision-making and moving information between two different bodies. And that's not uncommon to the city of Lake Stevens. That's every organization that I'm part of, and I'm sure most of you, when you work with outside agencies, you'll have a steering committee or an executive committee, the technical committee. And so it's always, what does the workflow and the communication flow look like between those different legs of the stool, if you will? So we'll continue to work on what that looks like. With that, we are going to have some specific questions that I'll go ahead and run through. Before I do that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Commissioner Huxford, who is the new chair for the Planning Commission for 2025, and allow her to introduce herself and the planning commissioners, or they can do that themselves. And then we will run into the series of questions and just have a good dialogue.
Thank you, Director Wright. I appreciate the opportunity, and we appreciate being here this evening as a commission. We are missing Commissioner Davis, Connor Davis, who is involved in something with our school district this evening, and we will miss him. Otherwise, on behalf of the commissioners, I thank you for having us here. We want to make sure that this is a substantive meeting, that we appreciate you, and we know that you appreciate us, but we'd like to have some meat that comes out of this meeting. So if we could keep that in mind while we discuss what we're going to be doing the next year, we would appreciate that. And with that, I will let the commissioners introduce themselves briefly and perhaps mention how long you've been on the commission. I'll begin with Commissioner Dewar.
Good evening. Mike Dewar. I've been on the Planning Commission since 2020. Actually, my first meeting was a COVID meeting. So my first couple of years were entirely remote.
Marika Matz, and I've been on the commission for a whole month, almost a month, 21 days.
Great. Nathan Packard, about a year.
And Bruce Morton, I've been on the commission for about a year and a half.
I'm Jennifer Davis, and I think I've been on the commission since the dawn of time.
About 12 years?
13 years. I think I'm in my 13th year, and I'll be vice chair this year.
So if I could, Director Wright, we had a spirited discussion, as we always do. Our discussions are really, we don't come at things from the same angle, and I appreciate that about the commission, and it's what I look forward to the most. We also get a lot of feedback from our community, and I dare say, I know that you do too, but perhaps in some cases, people are more comfortable coming to somebody that's not elected. And so we get a lot of feedback from our community, and we want to make sure that we're speaking in a language and doing things in policy that will assist our community members in how a public meeting works, when to show up at a public meeting, who to direct their questions to, how to do that appropriately. And speaking in language that they understand. The acronyms are killing me. And even in our past couple of meetings on the comp plan, we're frustrating people needlessly by not explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what that consists of. So the simplest of things, I think, will help in that whole piece of transparency. I'm going to turn the time over to my commissioners to ask their specific questions. But because Commissioner Davis is not here, Connor Davis is not here, his transparency question stems around a decision that was advisory, yes, but a choice that was made by commission to send it to you, a choice that was made by the community to be very vocal, and then went a complete left field in the sale of a piece of property. And we were only made aware of it when the community came to us to ask why what their pleas were to us weren't honored. We were not told that change had been made. Had I not been sitting in that meeting online, I wouldn't have known that the council had even made that choice. So it's decisions such as that. Not everything that we send your way needs to come back to the commission. We don't want that. That's needless and time consuming. But there are things that I think for the greater good can be communicated a bit better and will help us then in our deliberations of what we are advising you. Yes, please.
So if I'm getting this right, and I kind of agree with you, let's just say that there's something that comes from the planning commission that we're supposed to make a decision on. And we've decided that it's not going the way we thought it was going to go. And the planning is, your recommendation to us is something different than what we feel. We shouldn't do anything probably at that point, but have a discussion about it. Make sure that it's basically codified from us to send you a message of what we're thinking so you can relook at it with that information.
Not necessarily, and I'll let the other commissioners weigh in. You are elected to do your job and you need to do it. But if there is something that is done, I don't want to get into specifics, but you all know what I'm talking about. If there is something that is done that is so differing from what the public has advised us on, what we have deliberated on and then sent your way, it would be, I think, a courtesy to come back and not just let us know, but maybe give us a couple items of why that choice was made. We were caught flat-footed.
Which decision cut us?
The sale of the property up by the fire station. Now I've gotten specific.
Yeah, that's.
Did you see how transparent that was? Anyway, I'm going to hand the microphone off to whomever else wants to speak. There were some really pointed questions that came up, and the most was directed directly at me by Commissioner Dewar. I need to stay in my lane. I need to make sure that I'm doing what I'm asked to do as a volunteer commissioner. I get that. I will try to do better at that. But at the same time, volunteering my time is precious. This city is precious to me, to all of us. It's why we do it. And I want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can and getting as much information to you and from you as possible in keeping in both of our roles. With that, I'll turn the time over to whomever asks.
So before we move into the open conversation, one of the things we did agree to at the Planning Commission meeting was to go through a series of questions to engage both boards to start talking about some things. So I think we should go ahead and do that, and that will probably uncover a lot of the topics. So with that, I will go through some of the questions. So the first concept was, how do we facilitate better communication flow between the council and planning commission? Part one is, what information should the council liaison provide the planning commission at meetings? And the second part is, should the planning commission chair attend city council meetings or hearings related to planning commission recommendations? With that, I would like to hear first from Councilmember Peter Shagan, and then probably Councilmember Donahue. And I ask that of Councilmember Peter Shagan because you were the liaison to the Planning Commission for quite a long time. And just to sort of hear from you and then hear some comments back from the Planning Commission on those topics.
So how do we foster greater communication? Hopefully you can bail me out, Ryan. That involvement, I guess I would say, I hope that the planning commissioners listen to the city council meetings. And I would hope that some of our city council are involved with what's going on at the planning commission so that we are in tune with things that are taking place. As far as your work program, we have a flavor of what's on the schedule, but I will say we probably as a body don't know exactly what you're talking about every week. I would tend to think that maybe a representative of the planning commission maybe just rotated, attend the city council meeting so that if there is something that comes up, that we can address that, you know, at that point. I know Mr. Packard and Mr. Morton have attended lately on a regular basis, and I think that's helpful because that dialogue is there. Obviously, they don't represent the entire planning commission, but I think if you could keep that model going of attendance, maybe once a quarter, you know, kind of rotate it around or something, so that when we do have issues like you're talking about, that sale of that property, that, you know, we can have a better sense of the dialogue for that. As for the council information going to that, we've kind of always treated, I think, the liaison more of a listening situation. If you want more participation, I certainly wouldn't be against that, but you know, maybe a council report to the planning commission to open the meeting once a quarter or something of that sort. It is your meeting, so I don't think there should be too much involvement with, you know, dialogue and so forth, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
So, excuse me. Yeah, I agree with all of that. And at the end of that last planning commission meeting, I actually, you know, I felt bad. You know, my understanding of the role was that it was largely to listen and not participate. And I fully volunteered that if there are specific questions the planning commission would like to direct at me as the liaison, I'm more than happy to try and answer those. I will caveat it by saying, you know, just like you guys, sometimes when we're up here discussing, I don't always know why people, you know, have the opinions that they do or make the decisions they do. But to the extent I'm able to kind of pull back the curtain on what the council as a whole is thinking, I'm more than happy to do that. So, and I believe it was Commissioner Huxford who also volunteered, you know, that they'd be more willing to ask me direct questions. And so I think there's a willingness on both sides to increase that communication flow. We just have to start doing it.
Can I just add something I'm always careful of when I'm a liaison with a board is I'm a city council member. I'm one of 7. So when we're at your meeting, we can share information, maybe discuss at the meetings. Like I said, it's like Gary was saying, Councilmember Peter Shagan was saying, if you were to watch the meetings on YouTube or attend them, then you would hear them firsthand. But otherwise, you might hear or see of my perspective. But I'm very careful not to speak for council because I'm one of 7. I don't have that authority to speak for council as a whole, you know, beyond, you know, things that we discussed as a whole. So I think sometimes that can be a little challenging.
Absolutely. And along those same lines, also, again, because, you know, the liaison role is not, I guess, an official role, just being mindful of Russ and his staff and kind of the topics that they need to cover and the information that they kind of want to steer to the planning commission versus getting too far afield on other topics. I mean, outside of the meeting, please approach me. I'm happy to talk about that stuff as your city representative, but during the meetings, I would also defer heavily to Russ and his staff as far as, you know, what's an appropriate topic for me to report on. So
I'll just add, I really appreciate Director Wright and his team and the meetings that I attend at the Planning Commission. I see very similar information being there, presented there as at council meetings. The staff are very well prepared to answer questions, even questions that aren't part of the material for that evening. And so that's super helpful for me coming to planning and hearing that type of consistency between the commission and the council. So thank you, Director Wright, to you and your team for that type of communication. I feel like that's super helpful. I've never gotten a curveball at a planning commission meeting or council meeting like, oh my gosh, like where'd that come from? It's just very consistent. We have the agendas that are there for planning commission council. There's a lot of shared information. So you and your team are just doing great work. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And then I would direct that to Commissioner Davis on the Planning Commission first. Maybe your feedback on that first question, since you do have a lot of tenure. We've heard from Commissioner Huxford, and then if there are others that want to, share a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the flow of communication between the liaison and the board is something that we could improve on both on our side. We could ask questions. I think I wasn't present at that meeting on January, so I'm not sure what the discussion was with regard to that, but I would say my big takeaway from this year in terms of communication had a lot to do with our public hearings that we had. We had a lot of engagement at those hearings. They were fantastic. And I don't know, we're sort of the first line of engagement in these topics for the community, and they come and they have a lot of emotion and ideas and sometimes confusion that we try to help them with. And so we get a lot of input from the community about what are the top areas that are the most concerned or the most pressing. So we heard a lot about that. And I worry sometimes that when they come to us and they think that we're less of an advisory board and more of a decision-making body, that they feel like, well, I took time to come and after work and I missed dinner and I showed up and I said my piece and you're saying that you can't, you're not going to make any decisions about this. And so then maybe they don't engage the council. So I guess what I'm getting at is we get a flavor for what the community is thinking, and sometimes people will go on and we'll advise them, please go share your thoughts with the council. Sometimes I worry that they don't, and that they just sort of have expended the energy that they're going to expend on that topic and not come to you. So something I've been thinking about is a way that we could share with you, and maybe it is at an annual meeting like this where we can say, hey, we heard a lot of housing issues and the concern about balancing affordability with mandated growth, which is the top thing in my mind that we heard this year. And maybe it is just once a year that we give you that, but I have been kind of trying to think of ways that we can communicate with you about the flavor of what we're hearing. So it's not always bullet point specifics. It's more of like, our ears out there in the community and we're getting a sense of what people are worried about. So I don't really have an answer for that, but that's something that I would like to, talk to you more about as we move forward and then your liaison capacity. So that's kind of what it's going to be.
I have no additional comments on this particular topic. I think I agree with that. Just about everything one's been saying. So yeah, fortification is good.
Would it be helpful when you do have a public hearing that we get the minutes of that public hearing in our packet?
Yeah, we can easily do that.
At least those are the big things that take place, and that would maybe give us a flavor as to what your thought process is. If we could get those, just part of the packet.
Sure.
So.
Council President, I'm hearing from people online that those mics are cutting out. Can I switch out this mic? I know this is a little more awkward to pass down. I'm gonna have to use this tonight. They're telling me they can't hear you very well.
Kelly, we also have the extra one at the end there too, if you want to do a second mic.
Perfect.
Are there other thoughts from the Planning Commission on this topic when we get the mics done? Otherwise, I think Commissioner Davis's comments were a great segue into talking about priorities.
Sorry, we were getting organized. Your segue into what?
I think that Commissioner Davis's comments were a great segue to talk about priorities. And maybe we'll start with Councilmember Tagent. You've seen the city council for a long time, and then I'd be curious to hear from other council members, since you've looked at the packet and the proposed work items and the results with the Planning Commission. What do you think should be some of our focus priority areas moving into 2025? Talking about housing, critical areas regulations, process, and then our sub-area planning for the industrial area.
For me, I believe the focus on critical areas. Looking at the critical areas around Lake Stevens, we don't have a lot of building land. And then I would say looking at our industrial center and sewer infrastructure there and looking at how that is going to plan out. I think Mr. Peters Hagen has mentioned maybe we need to really take a good hard look at what we have planned out there. And I know we've had some issues with where the sewer is going and how that sewer is going to be paid for. I look at the plan out there sometimes and I feel like we don't have a great plan. And I think that there's a lot of area out there. And that's one of our last opportunity areas for growth for in our industrial area, as we don't have a whole lot of land left.
And then maybe Councilmember Jorstad, haven't heard from you tonight, and then I'll open it up to any other council members and then start with Commissioner Dewar.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight. I always appreciate these conversations. I just have a passion for housing and affordable housing and housing for everyone. And it's gotten quite a bit harder over these last couple of years. I know that some of the laws that are being passed in our state are making the goals that we have around providing housing and a continuum of housing to our community makes it harder, not easier. So I appreciate your work trying to stay abreast of those changes. I appreciate our just our team at the city helping us understand those changes, and they're coming kind of fast and furious these days. I just hope we don't lose sight of the fact that we have just such a diversity of folks in our city, and as much as we can, they all deserve to have a place to call home, and that looks different for different people. And the more that we can offer and provide in our city, that diversity to match a person's needs, I think that's what we all want. So I appreciate your work in this direction, despite how difficult it's getting, and probably will continue to be. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Any other council members that want to share your perspectives on priorities?
Yes, I do want to jump in here. The Lake Stevens Industrial Center, as Councilmember Tangent spoke about, I think we're really limiting ourselves to isolating or focusing this area as an industrial center. Throughout the comments here, throughout our interaction with the county, it's pretty darn obvious we're not going to see a UGA expansion anytime soon. So we don't have any options as far as development other than the industrial area. And I would hope that we would kind of take a different approach and a different look at that area. Personally, I don't think that an industrial area job center out there, the area is simply not big enough to attract anything of significance. And I think that's part of the reason with the lack of sewer out there is why we got what we got so far. So I would hope that we would kind of expand our thought process and think outside the box a little bit and maybe look in essence, I guess, as this area is our UGA expansion, and try to do some master planning along with Councilmember Jorstad's comments. Until we expand the supply of housing, you're not going to see affordable housing. So this is our avenue, I guess, out there to explore that. And I would hope that we look at that real carefully before we just go headstrong into industrial. The other issue I would like to speak to is, and I appreciate your comments, Director Wright, regarding the parking. I didn't realize I should say, I think the parking is kind of focused on residential. I hope. No.
Across the board.
Across the board. Okay. Just from what I've seen, Bartell's is probably not a great example, but from the get-go, that was kind of a compromised parking area. And the conflicts between the RAM and Bartell's when it was ongoing operation, significant ongoing operation, were always a challenge. And I see that being repeated up at Soper Hill at Starbucks and the activity that's taking place up there. There just simply isn't enough movement or parking for those establishments up there. And so I would hope that we would kind of sit back a little bit and, you know, we are a suburban area, some areas transitioning to urban, but at the same time, we are car centric and we need to plan for that. So I would hope that we would look at those parking regs a little bit stronger. So that's all. Thank you.
I would agree with what has been said on all counts so far. The one thing that I want to ensure that we do is that we maintain the same definitions of housing. What is affordable housing? What does that mean? What is low income housing? What does that mean? What does an infill mean? What is the definition so that we're using the same definition that everybody else is using? The citizens, the planning commission, the staff, it's all the same definition, because it has been in the past that we will say a word and it means something different to everybody. Like if we say affordable housing, there's some people that think that that's low income housing, and that's not what it is. So I would hope that we're going to codify what the definitions are so that we're all on the same page when we're talking about these things. We had a discussion about this last year on the council, and we basically codified what the definition of affordable housing is. And I'm hoping that we're keeping that. So I think the staff can help us out with that and get that set when you start talking about those things, so we have all the same definitions. I think it's very important.
I just want to say one of the conversations I hear a lot when it comes to housing, of course, lack of housing, affordable housing, but that brings us right into traffic and traffic planning around housing, recognizing, thankfully the trestle is the #1 capital project in the state, if I understand that correctly, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. So I know that's a big concern of our community as we expand housing. How are people going to get around Lake Stevens? How are they going to get in and out of Lake Stevens? So making sure, I think also that we're all on the same page in conversation so that, if our citizens come to you with questions in regards to that, you know what our limitations are, and where we can expand, both ways.
So one thing I'll add to that is stepping back a bit in terms of how I determine my priorities. It really boils down to 3 sources. It's conversations with my fellow council members, it's feedback that I receive from citizens, and it's a large part of it. I lean on Russ and his team as far as statutory requirements and what we have to get done as a city. So that's just, how I go about looking at it. As far as what ranks at the top, I mean, I'm really pretty open to the needs of the city. My goal is to try and avoid what I think is most important and focus on, either what we need to get done or what I'm hearing. And so to your comment, Commissioner Davis, you guys probably do get a lot more direct feedback. And to your comment, Commissioner Huxford, people might be more apt to approach you. So if you have feedback as far as what should be prioritized, I want this to go both ways. I don't want I know it kind of tends to look on paper like our priorities need to be what are matched, but you guys are a great source of information for what our priorities should be. So please, by all means, feel free to pass that information along, direct people to me, because that's a big part of how I determine what should be a priority.
Councilmember Ewing, did you have any comments?
I do. I just appreciate the increasing focus, I guess, and the collaboration between the mayor and the staff and the council. So as far as the work group goes, there's things that I may disagree on, and I've probably had some of those pointed conversations and disagreements with the mayor. But we have those conversations, and as I get feedback from him, I understand that I'm being a little myopic in my assessment of, what I think needs to be the most pressing thing, and we need to handle it now. And so having conversations with our department heads and others, including citizens, is helpful for me to to focus on the things that we need to focus on. And, you know, I can't keep abreast of all the legislative action that's going on, the hundreds of bills that are there. And so I appreciate our lobbyists and our staff and others that are helping keep us focused on the things that are of the greatest importance. And I'll just say my goal when I came on the council was I wanted the city to be a better place when I leave than when I came on. I had no agenda, no single issue. I said, hey, this is what I want. And I appreciate being part of that, because if I get focused on a single issue, then I tend to be myopic. And I don't want to be that person that's just, you know, beating a single drum. And so I'm very appreciative. This past year for me was just a really fulfilling year as far as the amount and the quality of work that was able to be done, because the mayor and the staff, the council were rowing together. And it was very impressive to see what was able to happen as we did that. And so it's required me at times to take a step back and pause and think things more in the global sense. And I think a lot of that's from the leadership of, you know, Council President Peter Shagan, the mayor, and the city staff have just done a really outstanding job of helping us focus. So I'm appreciative of that. I don't have any feedback. I do have a question for council, and I don't expect an answer, Gary, but your thoughts on the industrial area. If you say you want to rethink that area, I'd love to hear ideas for what that looks like at some future point.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think we can talk about some of that ideation when we get to question 3, but I will turn that over to the commission just to maybe if you want to briefly run down the line and talk about how you came up with your priorities, and we'll start with Commissioner Dewar.
Okay, so thank you. I think when I was thinking about the priorities and working through that online sheet, you know, the question to me is how can we maximize the quality of life for those who live and work in Lake Stevens? And you know, looking at some of these things, of course, we're going to have edicts from Olympia that we have to implement, you know, through the work of the commission and through council. But you know, thinking about things like housing and critical areas and those kind of matters, those are the issues that I think can kind of maximize those quality of life, the rate of return, and just overall livability of Lake Stevens itself. So that was kind of how I put my chips.
So I went into the survey very blind, not knowing a lot of these items, but I took a very similar approach. I looked at what I felt was going to increase quality of life or make a better community all around Lake Stevens as top priorities. And since I wasn't as familiar with the legislation items and regulations, those were lower on my list, except for critical areas ordinance. That I had a little bit higher, I think mostly because it appeared as something that is needs to be addressed in 2025. And I think that's one of the questions we're looking to have clarity today.
Okay, so I won't touch exactly on what my priorities were, but more just an observation from this conversation, right? So as we talk, for example, about the industrial area, I'm not sure most of the city has a sense that there is even a goal for the industrial area. I'll say I didn't know that there was a goal until I started coming to Planning Commission and to attending city council meetings. So if that is a priority for the city council and for the Planning Commission, I think something should be done to try and communicate that, right? So if the city says, why are we spending any resources up there? Well, what is the vision for that? What are we hoping to accomplish? How can that eventually help the city and their quality of life? Because their near-term focus is sidewalks, roads, you know, traffic, right? That's what I see every day. That's what I'm concerned about. I think there's a broader vision. Again, how do we use those critical areas? What is the future for the city? I think that's important. And as a council, as a commission, we should have a bigger mindset, a higher mindset about the broader goals. It's just a matter of how do we communicate that and share that with the city so that they have awareness and they know why we're spending the resources there.
I'll be brief, but I stayed on Planning Commission because of my association with the industrial area. I was also on planning commission when some decisions were made by then city council members that conceded a lot of that space. And so it is one of those areas that I think we've already made some decisions that we can't turn back from. But I also am encouraged that there's refocus there and that the ability to do some sort of economic growth where people don't have to get in their car and go across the trestle is a goal that hopefully in my lifetime will be achieved. How's that for positivity? And I take no offense, by the way, that the businesses up in that area are not pretty, but we are businesses nonetheless. And the people that work there are loving the fact that they can go to work in Lake Stevens. So thank you.
So on this particular question, I don't have much comment because I think that the process was very good for developing the comprehensive plan, and we went over it section by section. And if there was anything that could have been improved, and that would have been just communication to the public of what the implications are of the changes in the plan are. When someone gets a postcard in the mail saying that their property has been rezoned, there were several people who showed up here thinking that they were going to be kicked out of their homes. When in actuality, getting rezoned is kind of like winning the lottery because their property is suddenly more valuable. And it would have been really good if the city had more education or more details as to what the implications are for them, so that when someone knocks on their door and offers them a lowball offer to sell their home, they realize, oh, wait, my property is more valuable now because I've been rezoned. That price needs to go higher to that developer. Other than that I think that everything went very well. So, and there is some concern about that the public doesn't, we need to have a better way to communicate, or a better way of letting the public know what's going on. I think there's plenty of information on the website. There's email lists that they can join. The agendas are all online. Anyone who wants to learn more, it's available. We just have to face reality that 99% of them or more, 99.9% of the people really just don't care. And to us in this room, we just don't comprehend that. But really, people have their lives and they just don't want to be bothered by that.
I think my big takeaway in terms of priorities from last year and going into this coming year is this really intense sense of tension between the growth that we're mandated to have and the sense that people have of what Lake Stevens has been, what they want it to remain in terms of livability and the kind of the character of the city. And so that I made a comment in the survey about the idea of having some kind of, I don't know if it's just something that goes on the website or if it's something that happens at our meetings, or whether it's an Aquafest, a board, a trifold. I love a trifold, had 3 kids. That could just be like a mini planning primer. There's just so many people that come to us and they've never heard of the Growth Management Act, because why would you if this wasn't your special area that you were interested in? So some of the growth targets that we have, if you're a citizen and you read growth target, they don't realize that that's a growth mandate and that we're expected by law to accommodate that. And so it looks to kind of a normal person living their life and trying to figure this out on the way to soccer practice. Like, the council and the commission are trying to attract thousands of people to our city, and they just don't know. And so that's another thing that I've been thinking about is how can we help people understand the pressures that they're instinctively feeling are not happening for no reason, and that we're trying to balance the critical areas with the growth targets, mandates, and traffic, and having the schools be able to accommodate people. Like there's so much that, as you know, that goes into it. And so for me, it's the idea of trying to educate the public so that they can have more impact with their comments that they bring to us and to you, and understanding what we're all being required to do and balance and consider. So that would be my thought.
I just a comment about that. I love that idea. And I love, somebody else mentioned earlier, putting that in language that is palatable, is accessible, and not having it be like an open house where people have to leave their homes and their families and come. But, maybe there's a web page, or maybe there's a Facebook page, or maybe there's a, different ways through social media, or just a trifold sign at the farmer's market, or, different ways to just really sort of easily in a palatable way, explain some of those big forces that are creating the decisions that we make. So
And
love that
kind of
idea.
like what you were saying, as well as explain the language, because when you hear city targets, I do think a lot of people just automatically assume that as a city, we decided these are our target goals, right? These were, we as a city council, a planning commission have decided these are our city's targeted goals versus these are our mandates. So, I mean, I almost want to put in parentheses mandates under, next to the word goal, because as you mentioned, a lot of people are, doing this as they're cooking their dinner or trying to get to soccer practice, or just are busy with life in general. We rarely have people come to, with the exception of a few, rarely have people come to city council meetings, unless we're swearing in a new officer or maybe a new city employee or something like that, because people are busy. Prior to being on city council meetings, I would do that too. I would come as something was like I had a direct interest in, then I would, come talk to council. But otherwise, a lot of times I watched YouTube channel or more listen to YouTube channels while I'm cooking dinner and distracted with other things. And so I think that a lot of this stuff does get lost in translation. So any suggestions for us, how we can improve, I would definitely welcome that, because I appreciate the fact that every single one of you applied for that position. You went through the interview process, you accepted the position, and this is coming out of your personal lives. You're not getting paid for this. This is voluntary. And you're taking time out of your personal life to become more involved than, reading the bullet points. So if you have suggestions for us, I personally really would welcome them, because I know it is a channel. I had a very similar conversation with one of my neighbors because he didn't like that it was shared on social media, a lot of stuff, because he's not on it. I said, well, it's here and it's here and it's here and it's here, and you can listen after the fact. And he wasn't interested in any of those things. And so I said, well, what would your suggestion be to me? The last thing I want is a mailer that's going to show, basically spend thousands of dollars and end up in everyone's recycle bin. Right. And he didn't have any suggestions either. So it's kind of a challenging thing to take on when people are really busy, because there's a lot of different ways to get it out there. But what is a way that people are actually going to use?
And if I could just add, right, you've experienced this. It's not just lost in translation. It turns into like anger, right? It turns into people really angry at the city when there's no reason to be. And that leads to this toxic environment of people bad-mouthing the city and bad-mouthing, you guys are all money grabbers, right? We got that, you get that. And it's just silly that it happens, right? And it shouldn't happen. And so it's not just avoiding confusion, it's avoiding vitriol and anger and toxicity we just don't need in the city. Rumor, right? So if we can get in front of that, I think it's beneficial for the city on a lot of fronts. Again, how that's done, I don't know, but any effort we can do to help that, I think is important.
And that's a great segue into sort of the third idea. And I won't read this one verbatim, but basically the idea is as we start the scoping process or the fact finding and set our work program for each of these individual amendments, how do we communicate each body's goals and priorities at the beginning of that project to make sure that both boards are understanding of the legal implications? I like that the conversation tonight talked about the impacts on the community. So what does it look like? And are there suggestions on how we engage the boards before we move forward? Some things are obviously, as we've talked about, are going to be pretty prescriptive and we're going to have to follow that. But there are also lots of areas that aren't prescriptive. I know one of the things we've talked about is, do we do many surveys between the city council and the planning commission? You know, we have done that in the past on some different initiatives, and I think there's some success there. Is it just simple polling? So that's something, and you may not have responses tonight, but that is this next level of communication, is how do we discuss where the project should go, what are the areas of focus, then that helps my team deliver those and understand, again, the legal implications as well as the social implications. And that can also help us then with a communication strategy when we do put that out, whether it's a brochure, the trifolds, all of those things that we have done over the years and continue to try these new tools. But again, the more we're able to narrate a project at the beginning and really understand everybody's ideas, I think can help us. I think this time we will start with Councilmember Donahue and then work our way down the line, and not forget about Councilmember Tagent online.
Sure. So I actually, as you said that, I really like the idea, and I don't want to commit the council to anything, but personally, I like the idea of polling and just kind of doing that temperature check of where priorities are. Because as I mentioned, sometimes, you know, as a group, I'll hear a response and I won't really have time to think on why that person responded the way they did. So maybe kind of knowing ahead of time before we tackle big planning issues, you know, where everybody's at, even if it's anonymized, and then seeing how that matches up with the commissioners as maybe an indication of what they're hearing is from the social side, as you mentioned, I think would be very helpful. So I would be in favor of that, to the extent that, you know, it's not too often or onerous, you know, and burdening your team, but I think that's a good idea.
The picking priorities, I think is difficult anyway. I mean, first off, it's mostly staff driven based on requirements from legislature and rules and things like that have to be done annually or biannually or whatever it is. So your priorities are pretty much set for your work plan to make sure everything gets done in a timely manner and underneath the Department of Commerce or whoever's, you know, whoever's giving us the things we need to do. On some of those things that maybe are, okay, we're looking ahead, trying to get ahead of something that's happening in the city. Well, then it's important for us to figure out or be told up front what the issue is and where you think it might lead to, and get it over to the planning commission and let them discuss it. Part of the issue that I have sometimes is we'll get, and I really, I mean, I'm basically going to say this is my fault, because I haven't paid attention to the planning commission like I used to when I first got on council. I've kind of gotten off in my own way, a lot of traffic stuff with the rest of the county, those kinds of things. So what I need to do is pay more attention to the planning commission, the parks department, the parks commission, all those kinds of things. I need to start listening, because you get to hear from the citizens more than we do. You're the first line. And so I'm not going to say I do not understand the temperature of what those meetings are and where those people are coming from. I mean, I can understand that they won't come to you until they think that they're going to be affected personally. I understand that. You're completely right. 99.999% of the people don't care. I was one of those people 20 years ago. So I totally understand where that comes from. But if I don't pay attention to some of the nuances that you're hearing and what you're making your decisions on, we don't get that when you send it back to us. I don't get that when you send that back to us. I see what you recommended. I have my own personal viewpoint on what's going on. Sometimes that has been diametrically opposed to what you've said or what you've recommended to us. And that's not fair to either one of us. So I need to start paying more attention so that I understand what the priorities were, what the discussions are before they get to us, because we don't have any input to those discussions, except he's listening to them and reporting back. we still don't get the temperature or we don't get the nuances of what's going on. So I am going to personally state right now that I'm going to pay more attention.
Okay. Russ, I mean, you were asking how the staff improve comprehensive plan outreach and so forth, correct?
Not necessarily comprehensive plan outreach. It's just any time we're bringing a new policy or code amendment, just how do we make sure both groups are starting from the same spot and that we are looking at the right things?
I guess I would kind of put some of that back to you folks. You have two experienced planners that are sitting right next to you that have worked in other jurisdictions. And I guess I would ask, how did they do it? We're constantly wrestling with how do you get the public involved and let them know about things? And this isn't anything new. It's been going on for years. So I guess I would say, maybe we could tap our staff experience and see if there's any magic situation that they've encountered. Hopefully they brought that forward, but brainstorm to see what we can do to get that engagement and to get everybody on the same page. So again, this is an age-old problem of apathetic, I hate to say it, but the apathetic public, until it really concerns them, the proactive nature of people is not in land use. So I guess I would kind of, rely on staff a little bit to give us some guidance as to what could be done differently. So
Appreciate that.
I just think for the most part, it's not so much lack of interest from our community, because I think our community has a lot of interest. I think it's more they put faith in us, right, to make those decisions. And, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make decisions that are in their best interest and in our community's best interest. And up here on council, the thing that I always try and focus kind of on logical thinking, what's the logical solution to this? What makes the most sense, right? And so kind of piggybacking on what Kim says, I think one of the things that does get lost is that when people do come to you, because I do think the community feels more comfortable coming to you than coming to our meetings. When they come to you knowing their temperature, what is just kind of the overall thought process of the people that are taking time out of their day. What is their voice? What are they saying? And so that we can take that into consideration versus, reading our agenda and the attachments to our agenda, which is pretty dry. It's pretty dry reading, and it really takes out the emotion and passion of our citizens, and we're here to represent them. So I would, appreciate if there's a way to just kind of share when you have these public meetings, what was the temperature in the room? What were the priorities of those that took time out of their day to attend? And I just think that would be helpful. And then as Councilmember Peter Shagan said, is there a city that's successful in engaging their community? Is there a city that stands out? What are they doing differently? Is it a different demographic, or is there something they're doing differently? I think might be helpful.
Just anecdotally, I think there isn't. I go to SCC every meeting, and they're all basically talking about the same thing. All those council members and mayors are all saying the same thing. And, yep, nobody cares until they think they're going to get their toes stepped on.
they were saying it 30 years ago.
Yeah, they were. So I don't think there is one, but I would be open to anything you can come up with.
I don't know that I have anything more really to add. I would just to piggyback on something that you said about the packet being, really dry and a lot to get through. I think the flip side of that is it's a little bit more objective, right? We're reading the words, and it takes that subjectivity out of it a little bit. I think if the six of you were each to tell us what a contentious meeting was like for you, we're going to hear six different stories and six different experiences. You all have your own lens and your own, perspective of how that went. And I would love to hear that. I would love if all of you would show up at every meeting and tell us how it's been for you. And I know several of you have used, public comment time to share different, specifics about some of the decisions that have been made and the feedback you've gotten. But I also really just love being able to read through it because I just feel like I'm getting a more objective sense of what's happened. But yeah, I don't know that I have anything additional to add. I think this is a great discussion and a good opportunity to kind of flesh this out. So thanks for the questions.
I think the only thing that'd be helpful for me and maybe communication wise is to put the House bill or the Senate bill in parentheses next to the action that we're taking. Because I'm currently involved in action through my day job. And, I go back and read the bill and I see who the sponsors are and I reach out to them directly and have communication with them. And so if the citizens say, hey, Steve, why are you doing this? You worthless council member, or whatever they're going to put, on social media. I say, hey, you know what? I understand the frustration. Senate Bill, 3218 specifies this. Our hands are tied. Go look at it. And then you can have a hyperlink there. They can click on it and they can read the text. And they can read each one and they can see who voted yes and who voted no and see if they voted for that person in their district, their representative voted for it. And then they can provide feedback to them. So that would be a suggestion for me that we in our communication approve. So it's not the planning commission, it's not the council. We're following mandated legislative action. And I guess I would be remiss. I didn't just directly tell the commissioners. So I've been on the boards and commission interview panel. So 5 of the 7 people, I was on the board and I'm just super impressed with the type of work and the quality work that you do. And I've called it out before and I'm going to say it again. I think Commissioner Davis, Jennifer, is one of the most impressive people that I've ever worked with in a professional setting. Her passion, her knowledge, and her commitment is just is a tremendous asset to our community. And so leaving the commission was actually really hard because of how impressive she was. I really wanted to associate with her because I felt like she made me a better commissioner, even though she was far more experienced in that, and she was just really outstanding. So I want to say that directly to you. And I know people on other commissions, planning commissions in our community. They're not in the same league as you guys are. You guys are much more functional and you guys are doing really good work. It doesn't mean we're on the same page. And that's understandable. We are going to be on different pages and that's okay. So I just feel really grateful that we have the type of volunteers who are committing themselves. So one piece of thing that I struggle with, why we don't have direct communication, email communication with the commissioners. We get email communication. So I hear about all this public comment that's coming in, and direct communication. It's coming through either in person or a personal cell phone or neighbors or whatever. I think it'd be great if there was, we get publicly disclosed that, hey, what kind of communications have you had regarding certain subjects? I would love to be able to have the citizens reach out directly to our planning commission. I don't know what that would look like and what expense that would be for our IT people, but I know for the salary commission, if you click on the link to email them, it goes directly to Anya. And there's actually not one that goes directly, maybe just one email address for the chair. But something that we can consider.
That's something that was discussed about a year ago, that we were going to get email addresses. Just never happened.
With the type of work that you guys do and important, it's something certainly we can consider, but there's obviously gonna be a price tag attached to it, so.
Councilmember Tagit, and then I will turn it over to Chair Huxford and the commission if they have any final thoughts on this great conversation tonight.
I would say I think this has been flushed out by quite a few people. For me, I think I would agree with Councilmember Daughtry. Sometimes we don't always get to see how much information's coming in on certain topics. I think when make a decision's been made about a new community, we get a lot of those people, and we hear that there's a lot of information going on at the planning commission, and so we know a lot of information's coming our way, and we see how many people show up at meetings and the flavor of what everyone's frustrated about or the reason why they're there. I think if we knew ahead of time more of the discussion that's going on between the planning commission and all the input that you're getting, that would be really helpful. I think it's a problem that's been going on for 14 plus years since I've been on council, since Councilmember Daughtry's been on council. But at the same time, maybe being able to meet on a quarterly basis or have a liaison come and say, hey, I thought it would just let you know we've had a lot of talk about this. Here are some concerns. And maybe some polling at the beginning. I think we both want to take the right step forward together and have a good idea of how both groups are thinking, the council and the planning commission. Might be a way for us to both take a step forward in the same direction and understand what each other are thinking, and then be able to get that feedback from the community, because the same people who are at the planning commission usually come to the council as well. So getting a little bit more of that feedback might be helpful as additional thought, but I think a lot of this has been flushed out already, so.
I just had one quick comment on Director Wright's question about having better visibility between sort of the global policy plans of the council with our work, so that we can get our priorities sort of in alignment before we start our work. And I do think that would be helpful. It'd be interesting as we prepare to evaluate the Lake Stevens Industrial Center to have an idea of what council's thinking, long term. But having said that, I do want to assure you that I feel like, well, I'll speak for myself, but not the entire commission. We take it very seriously, our role as your advisory panel in this area, meaning that we approach these topics that are difficult. We try to do deep dives that you just don't have time for. You're overseeing so many different subject matter areas. And so we want to give you as autonomous an opinion as possible when we look into these matters, so that you can get unbiased opinions about what we think that the community is telling us, what we think as individuals would be best. And so I don't know that there necessarily needs to be like complete alignment between the priority approach. Maybe I misunderstood what Director Wright was saying in terms of priorities. We really do want to approach it with a fresh eye, so that when we give you our recommendations, you're getting something that is not influenced by anything else. We are really, truly, I think, working pretty hard to take the community's comment in and evaluate it and really put a lot of time and effort into the little nuanced areas before we offer that recommendation. So my big takeaway from this meeting was, this is the best meeting we've ever had in my time on the commission with the council in terms of like information exchange. But I would love to find a way in the next year to be able to communicate to you what we hear from the community in a more detailed way, and then continue to offer you our recommendations after we've really carefully considered the matters that come before us.
What are we talking about? Oh, final comments. All right. As usual, I'll be the contrarian voice here. A disinterested and disengaged public is not a bad thing. It isn't. It's not our. It should not be our job to grab the citizen by the shirt and say, "Hey, you need to be listening to us. You need to be interested in us." No, our job is to let them live their lives and not be bothered by things that we are regulating. And but when there is an interaction, when they are affected by what we do, we need to have the information there available, ready, so that they can quickly educate themselves get those concerns answered, and then go back to what they want to do, which is whatever they want to do. So I don't think it's a problem, but communication is a good thing, but yeah, anyway, you got my point.
I think I might disagree with that a little bit. Thinking about our most well-attended meeting, which had this room packed to the gills, to the point where I think the fire department was here, and certainly the police department was as well. There was a lot of what initially came across as anger towards what was going on. But if you started to drill down on that, that anger was coming from a position of fear. And that position of fear, I think, was coming from more deeply a misunderstanding of what was in front of them. And a good education or primer on some of what we do as a commission. We're all coming from very different perspectives, right? And that's what makes this commission great. Having that information available to them and being able to communicate that as a commission, as a council, and in your daily interactions with them, because I'm sure they reached out to you as well, and being able to have a pretty good understanding of what's coming could have pulled some of that fear away from them. And in the process of doing that, a small issue that rapidly got out of control might have been able to be avoided, and a more just understanding of what was going on and why might have been achieved. But I think to all of our commissioners' points, that tonight's event here was very helpful, very well received on my part, at least, to understand, where y'all are coming from. And I think I appreciate the opportunity to kind of show where we're coming from as well. So thank you.
I don't have anything to add, except I'm disappointed this isn't how meetings are all the time. So I guess I'm getting to start off with a positive one. I think the only thing, I was in attendance for the large meetings where people were getting very heated. And I think it goes to the point that was mentioned a few times by Director Wright and Angie, I believe you mentioned it also. The communications that we send out, the postcards, it's got a lot of letters, words, things on that people don't understand. And me being very new coming into the commission, you need a glossary to understand what you guys are saying and what we're presenting to the public. So I know that that's been a struggle for me, just trying to ramp up over the last few weeks is I don't know what the acronyms are and where they're being used. And I think we saw a lot of that from the public also in those meetings.
I'll just express appreciation to the city staff. They put time and effort into making this a valuable meeting. I expressed concern after the last one that I didn't see the value. And so they didn't just say, well, what do you want us to do about it? They created the survey. They were proactive, asked for our thoughts on multiple levels. And, we came prepared with a preparatory meeting of what we want to discuss, et cetera. So I appreciate the staff and then the council and the commission preparing so that this could be meaningful. Thanks.
And I'll just end by saying this is the commission. You've seen that we all come at it from different angles. I very much like that. We don't always agree. I also very much like that. Our discussions are get testy sometimes. I'm not looking at you, Bruce. They get testy sometimes. And I just think that that's needed. So please utilize us. Please take the jump off point of this meeting, and let's continue to have discussions on how we can better mirror what we need between the two bodies and do what's best for the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners and council, for that great conversation. Turn it back over to you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So from our side, I'll just close out and saying thank you for being here. Thank you, Russ, to your staff for the time you put in, but especially being the liaison and watching kind of the concern and maybe even the frustration play out about what this meeting used to be and seeing the push to get it to where it is now. I really want to thank all of you for making this a more constructive conversation. I feel really good about, where this is going to go. So hopefully you'll give me a little grace as I work with you as your liaison to try and give you the information you want. And I look forward to seeing what we can do this coming year. Thank you.
I have a suggestion for next year. I feel like now I want to like end the meeting and go hang out and go have snacks and talk about, how things are going, talk about our lives. So maybe we could, think about a social hour following afterwards.
And I just want to real quickly also thank the city, because without all of you preparing this, I don't think this would have been the outcome. So thank you to all our city staff who put time and effort into making this a productive meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you for coming. I appreciate your comments. The one thing I would suggest is maybe amongst you folks, when we do have our retreat, you select one unfortunate person that could attend the retreat. And
But
I mean,
shifts. You could do like
yeah,
a morning and an afternoon.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But again, to get, some background as to what the thought process is here. And so I would ask staff to include someone as a representative of planning commissioner next retreat, which I believe is in March. April. Okay. Sometime in April. So it's just going to be a 1-day retreat locally, I believe. So I would invite have a representative there, and then we can increase that dialogue a little bit more. So, yeah.
Connor Davis is missing, so we let him.
There you go. Done deal.
Yeah, I'm sure his school is going to allow that. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate this particular meeting. Out of all the ones we've had the past long time, I have to agree, none of them were useful. We basically sat across and looked at each other. We talked about what the work plan was going to be. And so, okay, see you next year, that kind of thing. This was very helpful for me. And I'm glad you were here and that we had this discussion. I know a couple of the commissioners are the ones that really pushed this, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you brought. So thank you.
Give anybody else a chance? No? Marcus?
Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. You guys do bring a lot of great information to us. And I know every one of us appreciate the different backgrounds you come from and the different opinions you guys bring. You can tell that there's a lot of conversation between the planning commission and the topics you bring, and some different backgrounds on how you guys come to your conclusions. And I know it's always very useful. And I think what Angie Jorsad said was it would be nice to get together afterwards and have a conversation, or have 30 minutes to be able to chat back and forth about different thoughts that maybe flesh out what we were talking about tonight. So thanks.
Well, unfortunately for us, no such luck, because next on the agenda is city department reports. So invite you to stick around for that, but I don't blame you if you need to get home to your families. So thank you again for coming.
Hey, Nathan.
You wanna go out of here?
Where's the fight song?
So looks like, unless there's been an internal shuffle with staff, it looks like first up is Lori with the Public Works Strategic Plan and Climate Survey Staff Report.
Okay. Just a little closer. Test. Still have an echo.
Sounds like it's coming up there. Have the volume on.
Alex with some, oh, it's still picking me up. Oh, that was the problem. Okay, thanks, Alex. Okay, good evening, council and mayor. My name is Lori Erickson. I am the Public Works Analyst, and tonight I will be co-presenting our Public Works Strategic Plan and Climate Survey. I will be co-presenting with Director Halverson. I'm gonna make my screen bigger here. There we go. All right, some of the topics that we will be covering tonight include a high-level background on why it is that we undertook this work in the first place. We'll talk about what is a department-level strategic plan, the process that we took to develop and deploy that strategic plan. And we'll do a high-level overview on what the focus areas are along with the framework. With that, we will transition to talk about why the climate survey. And a climate survey, in short, is really a cultural survey. We're trying to understand what is going on in our department, how people are feeling, and ultimately make improvements along with our strategic plan. I will then talk about our process and development of the ideas we have for improvement. We'll talk about the outcomes and wrap up with some questions if there's any. Without further ado, so there were lots of reasons that we decided to undertake these two bodies of work in parallel. So we obviously have had a rapidly growing city and a growing workforce as well. And with that, we've also had increasing needs and requests from our citizens and from our staff alike. However, we've been limited with our resources, and ultimately we've needed to focus on improving our service delivery and completing capital projects. Along with this, it's really been an opportunity for us to slow down, reflect on what's most important, and ultimately improve our processes, through project delivery, et cetera, and improve our culture. The biggest thing that we want you to take away from this is we really wanted to focus on what the right things were. So we get hundreds of service requests and lots of emails and phone calls every single year, and we have to ensure that we match up the workforce to meet those demands. We need our workforce to be successful in meeting expectations while also balancing that burden that we're putting on them through these new processes and these new expectations. Through this body of work, we have been able to prioritize the many ideas so that it matches the capacity that we currently have available. Anything to add, Erin? Okay. All right, so we're going to jump into what is the department level strategic plan. For Public Works, this is a 5-year strategic plan. Other teams or other agencies sometimes have a 5 to 10-year plan, and for us, the 5-year was the best fit. This is helping our department to focus on that big picture, and it also is really helping us with that resource alignment among the divisions. The methodology we chose for our strategic plan is based off the balanced scorecard for strategic planning. And what we really liked about this approach is that it's holistic. It focuses on people. It focuses on relationships, our customer expectations, how we do the work, while also focusing on how to develop our staff, balance stewardship, and also consider the environment. It's also a commonly used model that we see used across Washington State with other agencies and in other states as well. At a high level, the plan looks roughly like this. This is actually a snip of the first page of our 2-page strategic plan. It is broken out into focus areas, and these are really the big picture things. These help us understand what's important for the department and the organization. And as we move from left to right, we then have goals. So this is really what are we trying to achieve for each of those focus areas, followed by projects and initiatives, answering how will we make the goals come to life. And then finally, the right side of this scorecard is all about the metrics. So this is helping us to check and adjust. Are we performing the way we thought we would? Are we getting the results we thought we would get? And if not, it allows us to take a pause and adjust accordingly. Okay, as far as our process for developing and deploying the strategic plan, it's been a journey. This journey started back in early 2023. And really, we just kind of got to where we are today very, very recently. So I'll talk about the milestones just at a high level. Early in 2023, some research was done to determine what format and best practices we wanted to bring to this department and use with our team. And then we collaborated with employees throughout the department. So this is everyone, including crew level staff members up to our leadership team. And so we brought everyone together to start brainstorming what are those big picture items that we want to focus on. The picture there on the left is actually some of our admin staff in our conference room. And this was where we had a brainstorming and refining session to think about those big items, those focus areas. And towards the end of this exercise, there were some voting activities done to help narrow the 10 or so ideas down to a few that we then took back to staff and refined even further. About mid-2023, we were able to finalize those strategic focus areas, and then we moved on through the rest of the methodology, including developing goals, initiatives, and projects. The way we primarily did this was with a term called catchball, which in the Lean Six Sigma world is where a small group will take an idea, develop it as much as they can, and then they toss that ball, they toss that set of ideas back to the workforce who wasn't able to be in the conference room with us. And they get a chance to then give feedback, input, ask questions, and help improve the thinking. By the end of 2023, we had also developed a work plan, which is like the next layer down. So if we have a 5-year strategic plan, the work plan then helps us to figure out over the next year, what are the activities that we're specifically going to dedicate our resources to. So we finished that draft towards the end of 2023. And then in 2024, we came back and started working on the metrics associated with our strategic plan. This internally has been a bit of check and adjust. We've been running experiments per se to figure out what metrics really resonate with us, which ones drive action, and also which ones are we like, yeah, we thought that would do something for us and they're just not quite there. So we've been improving this for about a year now. Finally, towards the end of summer, we did roll out the strategic plan department-wide. We allowed folks to ask questions, weigh in, and start to make those connections to their own work. And just actually this month, we have provided training on the strategic framework, and we've introduced the 2025 work plan to all staff. All right, so these are our strategic focus areas. We have 5 of them for Public Works. The first one is track and maintain natural and built infrastructure. This is really all about getting a grip on what do we have and what is the condition of it? How do we maintain it? The second one is improve the natural environment and provide accessible infrastructure. So where we are able to focus improvements or bring in new infrastructure, it's about how do we improve those both for the environment and for the infrastructure. Our third one here on the right is ensure responsible stewardship of public funds to deliver reliable public works services. Obviously, like all departments, we have a budget we have to work within, and this is about maximizing our efforts and aligning our resources accordingly. Our fourth one is make Public Works a great place to work and empower a skilled and responsive workforce. So we understand in order to get major things done, to focus on the right things, we need a skilled workforce that is ready to take on these challenges and grow with us. Finally, we have foster positive relationships with the public, other city departments, and other agencies. So this is really about us trying to focus on improving how we work with others, taking feedback in, and being a good partner. And I think on this note, before I move forward, I'll just note that these were the 5 that we prioritized in this picture here. So where we started with about 10 really good ideas, we ended up breaking it down to these top 5. Okay, so as far as the connection between the strategic plan, the work plan, and also a new element I'll introduce here in a second, this is a high-level overview on the framework that we have adopted. So up here in the upper right corner, we've got our representation of our 5-year strategic plan. And this is big picture. This is looking at our work for the next 5 years at a high level, like 30,000 feet. From here, we take what we want to accomplish in the next 5 years, and we break it down into this here, our 1-year work plan. So these are really getting clear on what are the projects and or initiatives that we're dedicating our resources to help us achieve our overall strategy. And then breaking that down one layer further, we've also started to do 1-year employee work plans. We want all of our employees throughout our department to be able to see how their contributions help us to achieve our strategy. And this also helps us overall with our strategy as far as resource allocation and making sure that we're all working in sync with each other. Aaron, anything to add so far?
No, I think, I mean, I think the important thing that I always focused on is, that we're focused on is everyone's work should be tied back to our strategy in public works. And so the idea is that, you know, the people are contributing to the success of the department, and we're working on the things that matter. And that's what really we're trying to get to. So a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago now, when we sort of transitioned to a more, a different public works department, it's sort of like inheriting a kitchen that the dishes haven't been cleaned in yet. Except the kitchen is about more than 9 square miles, and it has a lot of roadways and things like that. Not that maintenance wasn't happening, just that we didn't necessarily track it or ensure that it's happening on a reoccurring basis. So we just said, look, we can't do it all at once. We're trying to eat this elephant. How do we do it? And we're just giving you an example of this is the process for how we did it. And it seems to be working pretty well. And as Lori mentioned, this is really the first year that our strategic plan gets down to individual work plans at every level, down to the maintenance workers. Every employee has an annual work plan they're working on, and maybe you're going to get into it, but they're working on some project improvements in their job. They have training goals. They have process improvement goals. So they're all seeing this constantly. And what I want them to do, and what I hope they do, is every time they have a quarterly check-in with their supervisor, they pull out this work plan and go, how am I being successful? That's a useful thing for them. Putting a plan up and looking at it, the science tells us, evidence tells us that people achieve those goals. They're more likely to. We're hoping that people will do that. The other part of that coin, the other side of that coin is when your supervisor, and you guys have all had supervisors, you probably don't now, but you probably did. You might now. Their priorities can change day to day, right? The political winds change or some idea comes up and they're interested in it. What the work plans do is they allow that employee to say, it's not on my work plan. You told me to be hyper-focused on these things. If you want to add something, I'm open to that. But we need to collaboratively revise my work plan. So it protects the things that really need to happen that we've identified in our strategy from those things that are a little more free-willed, a little less focused. So anyway.
No, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as the next steps for our strategic plan, we are implementing quarterly checks on our project progress. So we're really looking at the metrics. Are we on track? Are we off track? And if so, what do we want to do to adjust? And these are happening at the leadership team level. We also are reviewing for potential updates and adjustments here in just a couple of months when we have a short leadership team retreat. And all of this will be supported by analysis of workload on the employee work plans and if there's a need for balancing. Also, we will be presenting in the future the citywide strategic plan, which is being finalized now. So what we have to go back and do is make sure that our department strategic plan aligns and supports the overall citywide strategic plan as well. And finally, like Aaron mentioned, supervisors and managers will check in regularly with their employees on their employee work plans and adjust where needed. So while we've been doing this work, we've also been focusing on our culture. And this culture survey we've referred to as our climate survey. So a little bit of background as to why we decided to do this work in tandem. The department has experienced a lot of change in a short period of time. So as you know, we've grown in size of our city. We've had leadership changes in the department. Our workload and expectations have grown. We've also relaunched our asset management system, which has had some hiccups along the way. And all of these things kind of came together, resulting in a decreased morale in our workforce. So knowing that we've had that problem, we started to think about, well, how do we start to solve that problem around decreased morale? And so we did some research. Studies show that a happier, positive workforce culture leads to increased productivity, reduced stress levels, and more engaged employees. Our Public Works leadership team wanted to understand what was working for our staff and, more importantly, what needed to improve. And it just so happens that our climate survey improvement is also part of our strategic plan. So we've married these two bodies of work together. So as far as our process for how we went about the climate survey, first, we did a little bit of research on what best practices were, what questions we should think about asking, and so on. After we developed the questions, we went ahead and deployed that survey anonymously and electronically. The reason we did that was we really wanted honest feedback to understand what were people feeling and why, without feeling like, oh, I better just answer everything is great and awesome, because that's a risk when you have to attach an employee's name to that survey. After the survey was completed, we went ahead and stepped back to look at what the results were. And this was a pretty long process internally. But what we did was we looked at the lowest scoring questions, and then we decided to go back to the staff to understand why those specific questions were scored so lowly. So we did deep dives with small groups. And during those deep dives, I was one of the facilitators along with one of my colleagues. We really had to make it safe for people to speak up. So the survey was anonymous, but now we're in small groups, and we had to be sure that they trusted us, that we weren't going to go tell their story specifically and basically rat them out. So we had to dive into what were the gaps, what would it take, right, to get those scores up in the future. We then, across all the teams that we met with, we looked for common themes for gaps that were identified. After that, we brought those small teams back together to think about, well, these are the common gaps that we heard. So what are your ideas to help make things better? And then finally, we took those common ideas amongst the team and we put them forward to the leadership team to consider for adoption. What we really wanted out of this was real-time feedback and a shared understanding between the facilitators, the leadership team, and the staff. We wanted the employees to feel heard and feel safe in sharing their thoughts. And overall, we wanted to make things better for everyone who works in the department. We do feel like we achieved this. We had some really open and hard conversations with staff throughout the process, and we're looking forward to trying this again this coming spring. I won't go through all of this, but ultimately, these are the outcomes from the climate survey. So as far as the questions that we focused on, there ended up being kind of a split. So there were 3 questions for our crews that were the lowest scoring, and then 3 different questions that we focused on for the admin. So when it came to the crews, the 3 questions that we focused on that were the lowest scoring included, do you trust Public Works leadership? Do you feel recognized as a valuable employee? And has the culture improved in Public Works over the last year? So there's very much a theme here around trust. When it came to the admins, the admin team, the 3 questions that we had to focus on included, are you comfortable with holding your supervisor accountable? Are you comfortable with holding your coworkers accountable? And do you trust your coworkers? So a major theme here was really around accountability and how do we have some of those discussions when we need to. As far as the ideas for improvement, the crews really asked us to do these first 5 things in this yellow box, including holding folks equally accountable to standards and policy. I'll share one of the examples we heard. One of the, at least, perceptions from a crew member team included that our uniform standards aren't held equally across all of our employees. And there were a couple of different examples kind of along the same vein. Second thing is trust that delegated decisions are made with positive intent and that short-term fixes are not meant to be permanent. So essentially, this kind of came down to like our on-call staff and other instances as well. But one of the examples we heard included, well, I was on call, I did the best thing I thought I could do, and I felt like my supervisor didn't trust the decision I made in that moment. The third countermeasure here is don't sweat the small stuff. and mind how things are said. Sometimes tone can, send messages that we don't intend to. And so it's all about being mindful on how we say stuff. The fourth one is promote internally more, especially with some of the leadership positions. They don't come open very often. And the staff had a perception that we were hiring externally more than we should be, and they wanted to see more internal hires where possible. And then number 5 is a just do it. And that was a request to shift monthly meeting days so that everyone can attend, and shift meetings and trainings to the beginning or end of the workdays whenever possible. So those are the ideas that the crews came up with to address trust. And then when it came to the admin team was focused more so on accountability. And they had 3 countermeasures that they wanted us to move forward with, including communicating needs, timelines, and urgency clearly. Follow-ups are welcomed and encouraged. So for example, if I really needed something from my director, Aaron, then I need to be really clear on, I need this thing by this day, and it's really, really urgent. Please help me out. The second thing was to provide more cross-training and job shadow opportunities. So a lot of our admin staff, they are actually really hungry to understand how things work out in the field, so that we better can understand each other and collaborate more easily. And then finally, a just do it for the admins included engineering and streets. So those 2 teams meeting monthly for coordination and improved communication. And then to kind of wrap this up, as far as our next steps, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but we are implementing these ideas for improvement. So the leadership team has said that they're dedicated to trying to do these countermeasures, and we're going to try our best to make improvement. We will be running the survey again in spring 2025. We won't be changing any of the questions from the original survey so that we can have an apples to apples comparison. And then finally, we plan on rinsing and repeating this process so we can continuously improve our culture. Anything to add, Aaron?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. I think it's been really great working with Lori on this over the past 1.5 years or so. She does a lot of other stuff for Public Works, but I think the importance for us is, for me at least, and others is, Public Works is 35 employees in Lake Stevens. That's a lot of people. That's a large portion of the workforce. And so making sure that the strategy is clear for Public Works, where we're going and how people are contributing to it, and then how they feel about it and how they feel about leadership matter to us. They matter to the community. It matters about level of service. It matters about dedication. We met with the mayor on Friday on an issue, and we had something implemented by the end of the day. That's the Public Works department we want to be. They found the supplies on site, disassembled them, and put them out in the field. That's the culture we're trying to create. And this is how you do it. You do it. I think this is how you do it. You do it intentionally, and you open it up, and you become vulnerable. For me to read up there that do they trust Public Works leadership is the primary concern of our crew. I'm the director of the department. It hurts when I get a low score. That's low feedback for me. That matters. I want to understand why. How can I do better? What happened? And so I take that very seriously. Now there were a couple of things at play. We were bargaining the contract, and there were some things happening, but it doesn't matter. I need to take that as feedback and become vulnerable and deal with it. And one of the things I really like up there, don't sweat the small stuff and mind how things are said. That really matters for the director. It matters how I say things to the crew members. If I walk out into the shop and I'm aggressive, or I'm disappointed, or I'm showing any emotion at all, they react. So I have to be very on. I have to be very calm, and I have to try to be that person for them because it matters. It matters to how they feel about their workday and their contribution. So anyway, thank you, Laura. I think this is really great work, and I'm pleased with the outcome. Any questions? I know it's been a long meeting tonight.
So not hearing any questions into your comment there, Director Halverson. I'm looking at the time. Yep. Director Garceau, I know you've done a lot of work to prepare to speak to us tonight, but I want to make sure that we do your report justice. And I wanted to see if it'd be all right if maybe we move that to another meeting so that you have plenty of time to speak and you're not rushed.
We absolutely can move it, but I only plan to speak for literally 3 to 4 minutes. So totally up to you.
Right. And so I wanted to,
Please, Council President, feel free to bump my item. I'd happily bring it back.
that item being the mill concerns over here. Okay. Let's,
Let me, if you're gonna jump that one, let me comment real quick about, we had. I will say, I appreciate, Public Works, since we're gonna skip this item, on the mill spur, I do wanna, so the incident that, Aaron was talking about that we did Friday morning was the incident that happened Thursday night at the boat launch. We had another cargo on the water, which is a travesty, right? So we met with Public Works Friday morning and I was actually pinging them today, like, hey, have we done anything yet? And they're like, yeah, haven't you been out there? Like, we did stuff Friday afternoon. And I was like, oh, I guess I should go look at the boat launch. So so they had already put out some red markers on the asphalt and did what they could as a good immediate temporary fix temporary fix. And then we have some stuff on board that's coming in to do some more permanent fixes that hopefully will say, hey, this is a lake in front of you. And be able to not have that problem anymore. But I just want to applaud Aaron and his staff for I wasn't expecting the same day turnaround. I felt like I was a prime Amazon kind of guy, but you guys knocked it out and I appreciate it. And I wish I would have gone down and looked before I spoke today. And I didn't jack them up. I was nice, but it was great. But just a great turnaround on service and I appreciate that, Aaron. Back to me.
thank you. And I mean, I'm looking at this handout and I think I would like to know more about what's being done. I think the citizens would. So Clerk Chellan, if we can make time for this at a future meeting, and then I'll turn it over to Director Garceau for the Parks report.
Great, thank you. And I'm just sharing my screen here so that you can also see the year-end report that was created. I've also emailed this to all council members today and have paper copies here for anybody that would like them. This is just an overview of our 2024 year-end report. You can take the time to read through it at a later time. Short overview of some of our successes is our department created a mission and vision statement this last year. We created our first department's activity guide. We developed grounds, operations, and maintenance standards and ordered new park maintenance uniforms. We did add 3 new events to the events calendar. Those are ran by the Parks and Recreation Department internally. We also created an occasional use volunteer waiver. What this means is it's now good for 1 year. So instead of volunteers having to fill out an application at every event, they just fill out one and then we talk to them again 365 days later about filling out another one. They do still check in and out of events for us to track their hours, of course. Let's see, I lost my mouse, so I'm just gonna have to scroll here. Some of our completed projects, some of the bigger ones, we removed the existing non-motorized dock at North Cove and installed phase 1 of the non-motorized dock. We finished 30% design for the regional Bayview Trail. That was for all the way from here, all the way through Marysville. We did physically complete the construction project of Westlake Park and Bayview Trail Phase 0. We also implemented an adaptive management plan at North Cove Park to address water issues. This includes reworking the rain garden and top dressing the Great Lawn to help remove standing water. Some parks by the numbers, we've reduced a lot of water use over many of our parks. One of the most notable is North Cove. This last year, we still used 1.9 gallons, but that was down 18.6% over, she has the numbers from 2023, but I know we also reduced it an additional 24% for last year as well. So we had a huge reduction there. A total of $62,000 was brought in from boat launch revenue. This was from a total of 8,385 daily boat parking passes and 179 annual boat launch passes. We had 1,420 volunteer hours given through our parks. That was through 11 official events. And we also used 1,549 hours from DOC. One more fact, our rentals within the parks. We had 337 shelter rentals and 173 individual mill rentals, and that excludes all city use. That is my verbal update. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Sarah, thank you. Thank you for putting this together. You know, a couple of years ago, we had some not issues, but comments, I guess maybe is a way to put it, about the mill rentals. And I'm just wondering, can we get somewhat of a detailed breakdown, income and expense on the mill?
Yes, and I apologize. I know that was requested at a prior meeting and I failed to bring that back. So I will absolutely do that in the next few weeks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I love the report. Just for me, it might be helpful to see just one of the areas that noticed or said it was a reduction in the water usage, but for the other ones, for example, the DOC offender hours used was 1,504. Do we have 3,000 last year and we're down to 1,549, or do we have, 800 last year and now we've doubled that, So just seeing like some year over year to kind of see like where things are trending. If that is not an undue for you and your staff.
Absolutely. I'll look back to see what data we do have that we can send out comparisons for this year. Is it okay to just follow up in an email with that?
That's perfect.
Great.
One of the things that I'd also like to have broken down a little bit is on the reported vandalism. What I'd like to see is basically how much it costs us to take care of that vandalism and staff time and actual costs, direct costs.
Absolutely. This next year, Parks will make the full transition over to ViewWorks, which will allow us to collect that data. I can certainly go through and create a best guesstimate with the data we do have available and get that out.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else?
I'll just, if I may comment, Director Carr, so super impressive. I've admitted that I was skeptical of the need for, a parks director. And I was a position that was difficult for me to support. And I'll just say you've exceeded every expectation that I've had as a council member, and your team, which has been really impressive. And I really appreciated the Bayview Parks, just watching that happen, the open house for that, and just seeing all the other things, the community talking to citizens and how much they appreciate coming to the different parks, and even people from outside our community that are coming here because they like the parks and recreation that we have available to us. So that's a compliment to you and your team for the great work you're doing. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I definitely want to point out both Director Halverson and Director Wright led me with a great foundation, and my team has picked up the ball and kept it rolling. So I appreciate your support.
And then was your department nominated and awarded the city staff and team excellent? Is that for your Parks Department? Was that nominated by the other city departments, or?
That is Public Works won it last year, and we were nominated and won it this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And on that happy note, it is 8:00. So unless there's any other question that warrants extending the meeting.
I'd like a motion to extend the meeting for 2 hours.
Denied.